Apollo 11, the day humanity stepped onto another world. Imagine looking up at the moon and realizing that, for thousands of years, every human who had ever lived had seen the exact same sight. It was mysterious, unreachable, and impossible to touch. But in the summer of 1969, everything changed. This is the story of Apollo 11, the mission that took humanity to the moon for the very first time. It all began years earlier. In 1961, during the height of the space race, President John F. Kennedy challenged the United States with an ambitious goal: to land a man on the moon and safely return him to Earth before the end of the decade. At the time, it sounded almost impossible. NASA had never sent people beyond Earth orbit. Computers were far less powerful than today's smartphones. Every rocket launch carried enormous risks, and engineers were still learning how to keep astronauts alive in space. But over the next 8 years, more than 400,000 scientists, engineers, technicians, and factory workers worked together to make the impossible become reality. Their greatest creation was the Saturn V, the most powerful rocket ever successfully flown. Standing over 360 feet tall, it was as high as a 36-story building and generated more than 7.5 million pounds of thrust during launch. Finally, the day arrived. On July 16, 1969, millions of people watched from Florida, while hundreds of millions more followed on television around the world. At exactly 9:32 a.m., the engines roared to life. Slowly at first, then with incredible power, the Saturn V lifted off from Kennedy Space Center, carrying 3 astronauts: Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. Their destination was nearly 240,000 miles away. The journey lasted about 3 days. Inside the spacecraft, the astronauts performed system checks, took photographs of Earth growing smaller behind them, and prepared for the most dangerous part of the mission. Once they reached lunar orbit, Armstrong and Aldrin climbed into the lunar module called Eagle, while Michael Collins remained in the command module Columbia, orbiting the moon alone. Then came the descent. As Eagle approached the surface, unexpected problems appeared. Computer alarms suddenly began flashing inside the cockpit. Mission Control quickly determined the alarms could be ignored, allowing the landing to continue. But another problem appeared. The planned landing site was covered with large rocks and craters. Armstrong took manual control of the spacecraft, carefully searching for a safer place to land. Meanwhile, the fuel gauge continued dropping. 30 seconds of fuel remained. 20. The entire world held its breath. Then, at 4:17 p.m. Eastern Time on July the 20th, 1969, Armstrong calmly spoke the words that Mission Control had been waiting to hear. "Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed." Cheers erupted inside Mission Control. Years of preparation had paid off. Several hours later, Armstrong opened the hatch and slowly climbed down the ladder. As his boot touched the lunar surface, he spoke one of the most famous sentences in history. "That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind." For the first time ever, a human being stood on another world. Soon after, Buzz Aldrin joined him. Together, they spent more than 2 hours walking across the moon. They planted the American flag, collected over 21 kilograms of lunar rocks and soil, set up scientific experiments, took photographs, and spoke with President Richard Nixon through a live radio connection. Perhaps the most unforgettable sight wasn't the moon itself. It was Earth. From the lunar surface, our entire planet appeared as a beautiful blue and white sphere floating alone in the darkness of space. No borders, no countries, just one home for all humanity. After completing their work, Armstrong and Aldrin returned to the Eagle. The upper stage of the lunar module blasted off from the moon, leaving its landing platform behind forever. They reunited with Michael Collins in lunar orbit before beginning the long journey back to Earth. On July 24, 1969, Apollo 11 splashed safely into the Pacific Ocean, where recovery crews quickly reached the astronauts. The mission was complete. Apollo 11 became one of the greatest achievements in human history. It proved that determination, innovation, and teamwork could accomplish what once seemed impossible. Even today, more than half a century later, the footprints left by Armstrong and Aldrin remain on the moon, untouched by wind or rain. They are silent reminders of a moment when humanity looked up at the sky, dared to dream, and actually reached another world. The first moon landing wasn't just an American victory. It was a victory for science, exploration, and every person who believes that impossible dreams can become reality. Don't miss the next story. Subscribe, share, and be part of our journey.